Chapter 861 Pixie Princess. The further Xietain ran in a northwesterly direction, the more prominent the sound of explosions became. He judged from the level of constant explosions that there were definitely more than two existences fighting, or one of them was capable of launching many attacks at the same time. Worried that Seraphina had gotten into trouble again, Xietain stomped the ground hard and quickened his pace without holding back his natural agility at all. His body was a blur on the arid lands and the wind exploded as it was cut in two wherever he passed by. It's behind that mountain. Xietain was getting closer and closer when suddenly a startling scene occurred. The gray sky suddenly got covered with golden lightning, and the next moment that golden lightning rained down from the dark clouds hitting the back of the mountain. Boom! Xietan's vision was tinged with golden color as the lightning covered the surroundings. The ground beneath his feet trembled and a part of the mountain began to crack as the golden lightning flashes surrounded it. Xietain had no idea who had cast such a skill, but the power behind the attack could definitely be compared to the attack of a soul evolver above level 100. After carefully circling the mountain, Xietain did not show himself immediately and instead activated invisibility while hiding behind a huge rock. It's her? Xietain was surprised when he finally discovered who the existence fighting was. In a completely destroyed clearing, black earth completely scorched, large craters, and golden lightning flashing all over the ground like a sea of thunderbolts, two existences were facing each other in what was definitely a battle in which the victor could continue to live and grow while the loser would die and become the victor's nurturer. One of them was a pick*ch* like the ones Xietain had been hunting all this time. However, this pick*ch* was larger and more mature. Its entire body was mustard-colored and its belly was slightly white, while the two dots on its cheeks were no longer red but were golden yellow. Its tail was much larger and longer than that of the common pick*ch*s, and its ears were no longer long and pointed but had a much more complex and peculiar shape. In addition, its paws and hands were now completely brown. Seeing the golden lightning flashing fiercely around this creature, Xietain quickly identified it as the next evolution of pick*ch*, R***. The R***ch* was glaring furiously at its enemy, but it seemed to be that the previous attack had drained much of its energy to fight, as amidst that fury one could see growing exhaustion. "Little mouse, if you keep misbehaving then I will really punish you." The sweet little voice of a girl spread through the place, but far from serving as a warning to the R***ch*, it only served to infuriate it even more as it quickly rushed forward. "You still don't get it? Your lightning don't The R***'s enemy was taken by surprise when instead of attacking with lightning as it had been attacking all this time, its tail suddenly glowed, turning white in a second. Swoosh! The R***ch* leaped high into the sky and spun like a wheel as it slammed its tail ferociously downward, aiming straight for its enemy's head. R***ch* was not very big, only about twice the size of pick*ch*. However, its enemy was even smaller than a pick*ch*. She was only about 20 centimeters tall. Under Xietan's surprised eyes, the princess of the pixie race was forced to raise a last-second magic barrier just before the R***'s iron tail hit her. Boom! The R***'s physical attack was definitely powerful, comparable to level 99 soul evolvers. The pixie princess barrier barely endured for a moment before it was shattered by the enemy's tail and she was sent flying over 40 meters with a pale face. "Now you've really pissed me off." A small trickle of red blood slipped out of the pixie princess' mouth and her blue-colored eyes suddenly turned green like a beast's. The R***ch* seemed to notice the change in the atmosphere surrounding its little adversary, so it quickly reactivated the same skill as before and charged with the intention of landing another good blow. Volcano! The pixie princess' voice was loud and powerful despite her diminutive size. Under Xietan's stunned eyes, the ground opened up in a diameter of over 400 meters around the pixie princess and the R***ch* that was now plummeting somewhere. The small wings on the pixie princess's back flapped as she flew out of the large hole, and after flying 600 meters she pointed backwards with a small tree branch. Volcanic outburst. Rumble. The ground began to shake fiercely, forcing Xietain to retreat to avoid being affected or spotted. An instant later, a huge column of fire and lava shot out from the large hole that had swallowed the R***ch* star. Boom! The column of fiery fire and molten rock soared over 800 meters into the sky before it began to fall back down, attracted by gravity. Lava and flames danced in the sky and splashed everywhere, causing a huge mess in the process and finally crushing half of the mountain from which Xietain had been watching. The corner of Xietan's mouth trembled several times as he muttered to himself, "If I'm not mistaken, R***ch* possesses good agility, high magic attack power, and is capable of doing a lot of physical damage with its tail. However, that mouse has surprisingly low defenses. That little fairy's attack could have crushed at least a few thousand r***s. You think everyone knows that information? Lilith rolled her eyes and for the first time in her life began to regret a little that she hadn't read light novels or watched many cartoons during her childhood. The little pixie princess correctly received the r***s soul power and surprisingly, when the earth closed again, a green-colored treasure orb, a skill scroll, and a pearl bigger and shinier than the lightning pearls Xietain had collected so far appeared on the ground. Xietain narrowed his eyes at the sight and his brain began to move rapidly as he watched the pixie princess's movements. The light covering the small wings on her back had dimmed and there were no longer so many bright sparks around her. Also, her small but still generous for her body-sized chest was falling and rising heavily with each breath. She was definitely exhausted and injured. Xietain pointed his finger forward and slowly began to summon the endless blue lotus flame that rested in his soul. A deep blue dot began to form an inch from his index finger, becoming more powerful without increasing in size for every breath of time. The pixie princess' little feet had barely touched the ground in preparation to rest and reclaim her spoils of war, when suddenly her already pale face grew even paler. Her head turned abruptly to the west and her pupils twitched. Half a mile away and rapidly approaching, a new, fully healthy and energetic r***** was charging towards her on all fours with several golden flashes of lightning flickering around its body. She no longer had enough power to fight such a strong enemy, not to mention the fact that she was currently suffering from medium-grade wounds. Just as the pixie princess was preparing to fight, her body trembled as she felt the unmistakable sound of the wind being pierced by an arrow. Swoosh! The pixie princess barely managed to catch a glimpse out of the corner of her eye of a dark blue arrow brushing against her cheeks. The fiery heat was only there for a brief moment before it disappeared along with the arrow, but that brief moment was more than enough for her to understand what would have happened to her body if that arrow was aimed at her back. The r***** let out a strange sound from its mouth and its tail quickly glowed, turning white. Seizing the momentum of its charge, it leaped forward and spun while swinging its tail like a whip towards the incoming attack. Boom! The blue fire arrow exploded and sparks of flame flew everywhere. As the pixie princess took a couple of steps back forced by the shockwave, she saw that the mouse had been sent flying into the sky but had not actually died. There were several burns around the r*****'s body and its posture had been completely broken as it looked beyond her, with eyes wide with fear. The pixie princess didn't have time to turn around when she heard a powerful bang over 1,000 meters behind. Not even a second later and as the wind howled, a thin but swift beam partially illuminated the clouds in deep blue as it flew towards the unprotected r***** star. The fear in r****'s eyes quickly turned to anger and the golden lightning flashes began to crackle furiously all around it. Unable to control its body, all it could do was launch its own attack. However, although the golden lightning blasts were fast and powerful, the deep blue-colored beam possessed a great penetrating ability, therefore, when the two attacks clashed, r****'s golden lightning blasts were split in two and shredded to pieces. Boom! The sky rumbled and lit up blue for a brief second as r****'s body was struck, and under the pixie princess' disbelieving eyes, a glowing golden pearl and a second-order soul stone fell from the sky along with the remaining flames. The pixie princess quickly turned around, and there she saw the one who had saved her life but might soon become her enemy. However, she was very surprised to see that this person turned out to be the young human to whom she had nodded her head outside the dungeon. You have received the soul power of second order r***** level 87. Annihilation of the falling sky was in its bow form in Xietan's left hand. His eyes met those of the pixie princess again and he naturally noticed her surprise after recognizing him. Xietain said nothing, he simply used his skill blood manipulation to reclaim his own spoils of war. Then, he looked at the pixie princess again and nodded slightly in the same manner as he did days ago. Subconsciously and still dazed, the little princess returned the nod in the form of a greeting. Then, under her surprised eyes and before she could say or do anything, the human who had just killed the ferocious mouse with 2 attacks despite being only level 50 made his golden bow disappear and dashed off in a northerly direction at a speed that left the pixie princess breathless. Following Xietain silently for a few seconds, Lilith asked with a raised eyebrow, "Why didn't you kill that little princess? She was easy prey for you, you would get many treasures including those from her body, and it was clear that her soul power was very pure too." Xietain could have killed the pixie princess without anyone knowing, however, he shook his head and said in a casual voice, "Killing is not always the solution, at least not in the long run even if it makes us stronger." You wait and you will soon understand the reason why I let that little girl live instead of killing her. Let's hope that little pixie princess survives though, otherwise none of this will make sense and it will have been a waste to let her go alive. Xietain was looking much further ahead into the future. That was precisely why he finally decided not to kill the pixie princess and instead helped her out of a great hurry. Seeing that he didn't say anything else, Lilith shrugged her shoulders and didn't continue asking. She knew Xietain and was confident that his judgment was correct as it had been on most occasions to this day. Moreover, Xietan's words were true. Killing was not always the long-term solution, and there were times when letting the non-enemy live would be much more beneficial in the future. Chapter 862 Soul Wishing Orb Sone AE Upgrade. 2 days later, Xietain finally left the arid land biome. He had hunted over 89,000 pick *ch*s and 19 r**h*s in total. In addition, Xietain had finally encountered other living existences in the dungeon besides the princess of the pixie race. Some of them were orcs, there were mutant plants, humans, and other races as well. They were all extremely wary of each other, and when they saw each other, they immediately moved in opposite directions to avoid a clash unless they recognized the other party as an ally. The 4 biome turned out to be a snowy ground. The winds were blowing so hard that even level 40 soul evolvers would find it difficult to walk, and the snowflakes that kept falling from the sky obstructed the eyesight of beings above level 100. The snowy lands were especially frightening at night. Inside a man-made cave within a snow-covered mountain, Xietain looked beyond the entrance. This weather is crazy. A level 45 soul evolver would turn into an ice statue if they stay outside all night. Xietan's voice echoed somewhat in the cave as he threw a first-order soul stone forward. The endless blue lotus flame was doing its job as a temporary campfire in the middle of the cave. As a reward, it occasionally received precious food that it was devouring with great pleasure while keeping the place warm and dimly lit. This weather will be normal on Earth when it reaches the 4th stage, so you better think of something to counteract it now that you know how terrifying it can get, Lilith commented as she sat on the bed beside him. Hearing Lilith's words, Xietain shook his head and sighed. There's not much I can do except make good buildings and keep the weaker citizens from leaving home. It is absolutely impossible for each and every one of them to have the talent and ability to break beyond level 45 even if they had the intention to make it. Lilith nodded silently. Xietain was right. Even in Eventide world, a world that had just evolved to the 3rd stage, most living beings were no higher than level 15 or struggled at level 25 of the unclassified stage, trying to break into the First Order. Out of 10 people, usually only 3 of them managed to complete the evolution requirements in advance. As for the rest, they spent the rest of their lives stuck at the maximum level if they ever reached it. Once the two stopped talking, the howling of the wind became clearer and clearer. Each time a gust of wind cut for a brief moment beyond the cave, the howl seemed to turn into a fierce, bestial roar. After learning how big this dungeon was, Xietain had given up on the idea of rushing toward the silver-colored tower. Even if he arrived early, it was unlikely that all of his allies would have the ability to get there so quickly. Therefore, instead of being forced to wait for them, Xietain decided that it was better to take advantage of all the benefits that this artificial world had to offer. Besides, even Xietain could not see further than 10 meters in front of him with all the snow that was falling from the sky and the thick walls of wind swirling everywhere. With no good vision because of the snow, with his sense of hearing blocked by the howling wind, with his steps hindered not only by the wind but also by the snow under his feet, with the freezing cold freezing his nerves and hindering his reaction speed. Going out in the midst of such terrifying weather in an unfamiliar place was not very different from raising his hand to ask to be ambushed. Besides, Xietain needed to confirm a few things before continuing his journey. First, he took out one of the 19 golden pearls he obtained from the r***s. This pearl was no bigger than the pearls from the pick *ch*s, but its brightness was in all aspects superior. Lightning Pearl, Rank 3, consumable, contains a considerable amount of pure lightning energy, highly more effective than the Rank 2 Lightning Pearl. Effect: consuming one Rank 3 Lightning Pearl raises the level of a random lightning-like skill possessed by the consumer by 1, and in case the skill is at level 5 it will be raised to the next stage. Only works on skills of 2nd order or lower. This Rank 3 Lightning Pearl is a premium treasure no matter which way you look at it. Xietain fiddled with the pearl as he thought about its future uses. Too bad, I only have 19 of these. If I had at least 100 or 200, my subordinate's power would skyrocket considerably after consuming one of these pearls each. Don't worry, little brother Xietain. Lilith suddenly smiled mysteriously and looked at Xietain with glistening eyes. I'm sure by the time you leave this dungeon you'll have many more of those pearls, not only rank 2 but even rank 3. What do you mean with that? Hee, you just wait and see. This big sister of yours has good senses after all. Xietain shook his head and didn't try to get information from her. Lilith sometimes loved to play mysterious, and if she didn't want to say something then the only way Xietain could force or seduce her to talk would be in bed, but it wasn't time for those things yet, so he temporarily let it go. Swoosh! A 7-colored glow shone in the cave, illuminating the inside for a moment before everything returned to normal. Why do you continue to stare at that orb? Nothing will change even if you stare at it 1,000 more times, and I'm sure you've already learned the description to the letter, haven't you? Lilith asked, perplexed as she looked at Xietain. He was holding a 7-colored orb. It was the orb that the soul record had rewarded him with when he learned the skill soul manipulation thanks to Kali. Soul wishing orb, an orb capable of sensing the deepest desire of the soul. The treasure that will be formed will represent the greatest desires and urges of the one who uses it. It can only be used by those who have the skill soul manipulation. What is this description supposed to mean? Xietain scratched his head in confusion. He and Lilith had studied the orb for days, every night without exception. Unfortunately, it was difficult to decipher anything with the little information they had. Is it assumed that if I desire a treasure capable of immediately making me the most powerful being of all, this orb will fulfill it for me? Because if that's the case then this daddy might as well use this thing now, right? Lilith shook her head. I don't think it's that simple, Xietain. I'm not sure, since this is probably the only soul-wishing orb in the universe, but I dare swear that if you use that orb now, you'll probably regret it later. Call it instinct if you want. No, I know that too. Xietain sighed. Forget it, let's keep it for now and see later. Since the soul record gave it to me as a hidden reward for being the first in the history of the cosmos to learn the skill soul manipulation, then this orb has to be something really impressive. Unless an emergency arose, Xietain did not plan to do risky experiments with the soul-wishing orb. The value of the orb was too high to risk losing it due to a careless mistake. Careless mistakes were only allowed in situations where a miracle was able to save the day, but not at moments like this. Swoosh! After putting away the 7-colored orb, Xietain brought out Annihilation of the Falling Sky. The soul armament was currently in the form of a small golden-colored dagger with opaque runes. However, those crimson runes that were previously completely black due to the loss of power now had a small glow on them that added an extra layer of mystery and charm to the weapon. Annihilation of the Falling Sky dash. Current form, dagger, soul armament, physical attack power, 8000, durability, characteristics dash. Characteristic 1, it is currently lightly attached to Xietan's soul, but its true owner can call it back at will. Other than that, no one but those who have received approval from Annihilation of the Falling Sky may wield it. Characteristic 2, using mana, the user can change the form of Annihilation of the Falling Sky to any weapon desired as long as the user has a clear idea of its composition and features. Options dash. Option 1, being a king-grade soul armament, Annihilation of the Falling Sky automatically weakens the damage of any forged weapon, treasure-type weapon, or soul armament by half. Note, due to its current sealed state the effect is halved on forged weapons above rank 5, treasure-type weapons of demigod grade or higher, and soul armaments of count grade or higher. Description: a soul contract needs to be formed in order to reveal the true power of the weapon, and only then can the true Annihilation of the Falling Sky be seen. The requirements to form a soul contract with Annihilation of the Falling Sky are currently unknown. During the past few days, Xietain had slowly felt that Annihilation of the Falling Sky seemed to be strengthening within his soul. However, all the times he summoned the soul armament and used it in combat, no strange occurrences happened and the armament's records had not changed at all. That had changed today afternoon when Xietain was fighting against the enemies inhabiting this snowy biome, as in the middle of the combat Annihilation of the Falling Sky suddenly released a great radiance that blinded both Xietain and the enemy. After the blinding radiance disappeared, Xietan's enemy was nowhere to be seen, as if it had vanished, and the records of the upgraded version of Annihilation of the Falling Sky flashed in his eyes without him asking for it. Why on earth did it suddenly become stronger? Xietain was truly perplexed regarding this matter. Annihilation of the Falling Sky's attack power was previously only 1000 points, not bad, but it was simply deficient when taking into account the kind of enemies Xietain had to face. In fact, were it not for his frighteningly high strength stat and his other skills such as the endless blue lotus flame, the normal power of Annihilation of the Falling Sky would not have been able to kill second-order enemies so easily. Now that the power of the soul armament had suddenly risen to 8000 points, Xietain had finally gained an indestructible weapon that he could use in normal situations under which the use of his main weapon was not required. Lilith gently touched the dagger blade, and after reading the records she couldn't help but sigh, even though she had seen them before. As expected from the legendary soul armament of the Heavenly Wolf Sirius. Annihilation of the Falling Sky isn't even in its full form, it's barely been released a little for some reason, but not only has its attack risen so high, but its first option turned out to be so terrifying. The ability to weaken by 50% the damage that other weapons, regardless of whether they were forged weapons, soul record treasures, or other soul armaments, could do was simply cheating. In a battle between two existences, weapons represented a large part of the fighter's total power, and having the ability to weaken the opponent's weapon by half was definitely a big trap card that shouldn't exist. Could it be because of the skill soul manipulation? Xietain pondered. Although he hadn't felt any change in his soul, it was certain that the skill soul manipulation recorded that his soul was now awake. Xietain didn't know what it meant that his soul had awakened, but it was the only thing he could think of with the ability to affect the power of annihilation of the falling sky, which rested within his soul, in a positive way. Hard to say, but it's not like there's any other plausible explanation, at least for now. Lilith was as lost as he was. Just at that moment, the skill god of war's will of Xietain triggered and his expression changed slightly. Enemy, he said calmly, slowly changing the shape of his weapon to greatsword. Lilith simply smiled and without a word disappeared. Xietain would soon understand what she had meant earlier. One did not always need to find things for oneself, as occasionally there would be someone who would gladly give theirs. Chapter 863 Crimson Blood Judgment vs. Xietain. Oh, what a surprise. A cold, arrogant voice rang out from the cave entrance. To think I would meet a human here, and it turns out that human is none other than the brat who made fun of Kigdrag the other day, ha ha ha. Well, I'll give your head to Kigdrag so he can use you as a urinal and let off some steam. That voice. Xietain had heard it before, even before the demon's general appeared outside the dungeon. Xietain slowly raised his head, just enough to be able to see the other party's face, hence his hair still partially covered his dark eyes, which upon identifying the other party glistened under the blaze of the deep blue flame burning before him. The demon general, who had just arrived and was looking at Xietain as if he was looking at a little mouse waiting for its judge, was a mage-type soul evolver. However, Xietain recognized him very well. Arath, ranked number 8 among the demon generals under the demon lord's command and one of the main demons in the participation of the indiscriminate massacre in the now destroyed Syrian kingdom. This dungeon is so vast, but to think that I was going to be the first of the demon generals to encounter you. Fate is very interesting. Arath smiled horribly and the mana inside his body began to bubble. Looks like your luck isn't very good. Do you know why? It's because while the other demon generals enjoy raping human females and killing the males, I enjoy torturing. Xietain continued to stare silently at Arath through the fringe of his black hair. Hearing Arath's words, his lips slowly curved into what soon became a chilling smile. Really? Fate is very interesting. While this may not be able to bring back the children and newborns, it can at least be considered retribution in their names. He muttered under his breath before slowly commencing to stand up. 7 hours later, the sky had barely cleared when Xietain was already on his way north. Despite the low temperatures, his body felt very warm and comfortable thanks to the existence of the endless blue lotus flame burning softly in his soul. Moreover, his cloak contained large amounts of fire-like energy, so even if the temperature was twice lower than the current temperature, Xietain would still preserve his body temperature. Little brother Xietain, what do you think about my words last night? I told you that before leaving this dungeon you would get many more lightning pearl, and I didn't lie to you, did I? Xietain gently rubbed his storage ring with his fingers and a faint smile automatically formed at the corner of his lips. Indeed, you were right. As expected of you, my little succubus. Hee hee. It's a good thing you know my worth. What are you talking about? I've always seen you as someone precious to me. Humph, you sure know how to talk, don't you? It's because of that silver tongue of yours that so many innocent girls fall under your spell. After killing the demon general Arath, quite easily due to the latter underestimating Xietain and getting too close despite being a mage, the number of rank 2 lightning pearls in Xietan's possession rose to over 120,000 while the number of rank 3 lightning pearls now numbered 34. In addition, Arath was one of the powerful demon generals, a pillar of the demon race, therefore, he naturally had other resources in his bag, as well as high-value treasures. But now, everything became Xietan's property. Just at that moment, the high-pitched shriek of a beast caused Xietan's footsteps to stop. He tried to see beyond the snow, but it was incredibly difficult to see even 50 meters in front of him. Swoosh! Xietan's expression changed slightly as he felt the wind whistling towards him. His danger sense skill immediately triggered and in response, Xietain kicked the ground to move away from the place where his feet were on. However, Xietain soon encountered a problem, and that was that while he had managed to move away before the ice blade cut into his body, his feet had sunk into the snow, resulting in his explosive speed not having been as high as it should have been. Swoosh! Xietain subconsciously tilted his stance back when he sensed danger, and just then he finally caught a glimpse of his enemy. The enemy was a large, icy blue giant bird with a particularly heavy mane of white hair on its chest. Its legs were long and its talons sharp, its long icy blue tail was like a huge elegant feather swaying in the wind, and its wings were the same color as 95% of its body, large enough to hug the entirety of its form. Great, now it turns out I have to face the legendary P***Chem***N Arctic*** no. Xietain muttered with a frown. Stupid, stop playing around and get more serious. That bird is an evolved third-order beast. Lilith scolded. I do know. Xietain nodded, but just as he was preparing to attack he felt an enormous pressure weighing directly on him. His feet sank hard into the snow, causing a powerful explosion to reverberate as a crater formed. Xietan's back curved forward slightly and a flash of surprise shone in his eyes as he struggled to lift his head and look up at the sky. This damn bird. It even has the skill pressure. Xietain gritted his teeth, and it wasn't long before he noticed that his agility had dropped by at least half now. Scree! The Aritic asterisk didn't give Xietain time to think or react, since it launched attack after attack. After activating pressure, a skill that increased the gravity of a single targeted object for 60 seconds by 200%, the giant bird began to circle faster and faster in the sky around him. Swoosh! 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 The snow was swept away due to the high speed of the Arctic asterisk no, but consequently the wind began to gather and quickly formed a huge wind whirlwind, enveloping Xietain and locking him inside. When Xietain managed to repel the pressure of the Arctic asterisk no's skill by activating his gravity manipulation skill, he raised his head to the sky and saw that the beast had stopped spinning after enclosing him in the whirlwind. Xietan's black eyes noticed the flash of intelligence in the blue eyes of the flying beast as they looked at each other through the topmost eye of the storm. Under Xietan's slightly serious eyes, the great blue bird opened its yellow beak and an icy blue magic circle flashed before it. Breath-like skill? Xietan's mind moved quickly and he soon understood what was going on. Damn sneaky bird. Activating pressure first, the Arctic asterisk no managed to buy a few seconds to be able to activate its skill gust and thus enclose its enemy in a wall of wind that for the first 5 seconds was indestructible, impenetrable, and wouldn't let the enemy jump. Now, soaring on top of the whirlwind, the Arctic asterisk no planned to use its skill ice beam to strike in a straight line at an enemy that could not avoid the attack in any way. Besides, Xietain knew that his enemy was one of the most troublesome air-type creatures when it came to kill, because its agility was probably unsurpassed. Xietain knew that he had a few seconds to make his move before the ice beam skill was fully charged, so he quickly extended his right hand and created a blood spear using the blood of a second-order mutant beast whose main element had been fire while it was alive. Determined to wipe it all out in one hit, he activated his main destructive skill. He stood in a throwing stance with the blood spear firmly gripped by his right hand and with his right arm curved at a right angle upward, raising the spear slightly above shoulder height. Crimson Blood Judgment. The endless blue lotus flame glowed and burned over the blood spear, but its flames were tinged with crimson as the skill was activated. Xietan's mana fell, and just as a beam of icy energy shot out from above downwards, he swung his right arm upwards with all his strength. An attack that was similar to a bright blue beam fell, and an attack that traced a thin dark crimson line rose up. There was but a single track due to the thin whirlwind, therefore, the attacks met head-on in less than a second. The Arctic asterisk no's ice beam skill was certainly powerful, probably on the same level as Mei Lin's Frost Blast skill. However, the Crimson Blood Judgment skill was a skill that increased in power depending on various factors such as the power of the flame used, the caster's magic power, the quality of the blood used to shape the spear, the order the blood manipulation skill was in, etc. The unstoppable and dominating power of the Crimson Blood Judgment skill was immediately shown as the Arctic asterisk no's magic attack in the sky did not even manage to stand up when the flame spear pushed it upwards with complete ease as it continued its unstoppable ascent. The beast's blue eyes flashed with disbelief and its movements froze in shock just an instant before its body was struck by the crimson flame-wrapped spear. Boom! Xietain quickly squatted down and covered himself with his cloak while covering his head using his arms and hands. The shockwave hit his back once, but that was not the end, as immediately after the first there was a second, then a third, fourth, and even a fifth shockwave hitting him and causing his body to sink into the ground. Rumble! Xietain felt the snow under his feet sinking slightly deeper and deeper and the skies rumbling loudly. It wasn't until almost a full minute later that he finally felt everything start to calm down, and he slowly straightened his posture to observe the surroundings. Xietan's face was slightly pale. If not for the fact that his Solitude's armor of infinite trials had two options that served to reduce the damage of the shockwaves by 30% and double Xietan's physical and magical defense when he was fighting alone on the battlefield, he would definitely have suffered wounds after being hit fiercely several times by the remnant power of the explosion. When Xietain looked around, the first thing he noticed was that all the snow within a range of at least 5 kilometers around him seemed to have disappeared. Another thing he noticed was that his eyes could now see much farther than before, as the temperature had risen high enough to clear the snowflakes and clouds from the sky. Several snow-capped mountains that were in the surrounding area had disappeared or had collapsed to the point where they were nothing more than slight elevations barely above ground level. The power of the Crimson Blood Judgment skill was truly horrifying. Xietain hadn't even tried his best, but the level of destruction was already so high. However, remembering what his then weaker version in Oblong World had caused when he gave his all to boost the power of Crimson Blood Judgment beyond the limits, Xietain made a vow to never use that skill to its fullest capacity unless he had no other choice. The power of the Crimson Blood Judgment skill was already too high. But for an instant, Xietain could not help but feel the sudden desire to want to evolve the skill to the next order, since he had the required number of third-order soul stones. You have obtained the soul power of third order Arctic * No level 151. Chapter 864 Legend Grade Treasure Demon's Cruelty. Despite the fact that the Arctic * No's agility was unmatched and its magic attack power was extraordinary, its defense was as poor as that of any other feathered or furred mutant beast. Precisely because its defense was low, the level 151 bird lost its life immediately when it was hit by such a terrifying skill. To Xietan's surprise, the third-order Eric * No not only dropped a third-order soul stone after the total destruction of its body right after being hit head-on by the Crimson Blood Judgment that Xietain threw at it, but also dropped a feather. Is this the tail feather? That seems to be the case, though it got shrunk. There's probably a reason for that. Look at the records first. I'm on it. Feather of the Frozen End, treasure grade legend. When worn by a bird-like beast or added to a piece of equipment, the effects of the Feather of Frozen End go into immediate effect. Effect: increases the power of ice-type skills by 20% and reduces the mana consumption when activating an ice-type skill by 25%. All stats 200 when the wearer possesses at least 5 ice-type skills. Xietain gasped in shock and his grip on the feather tightened automatically. Jesus! A legend-grade treasure had just fallen into his hands without him expecting it at all. Xietain had entered this dungeon to fight for the chance to obtain a hopefully high-grade treasure, but little did he expect that even before he reached where the treasure was born he would obtain so many treasures and resources capable of taking anyone's breath away. In fact, even if Xietain simply decided to quietly leave without fighting for the treasure that caused the formation of this dungeon, his gains were more than enough to make the 8 days he spent inside worth it thousands of times more. Seeing Xietain freeze and feeling his heartbeat suddenly become irregular, Lilith frowned slightly and reached out her index finger to touch the tip of the beautiful icy blue feather. However, before she could touch the object, Xietain seemed to wake up and hurriedly put the feather away in his storage ring without letting the records manifest for her. What are you doing? Lilith looked at him puzzled and confused. This. Xietain hesitated before quickly saying the first thing that came to his mind: that feather is actually a mana storage container, you can save mana inside. Lilith looked at him suspiciously and after a brief pause pointed out, if that's the case, then why did you put it away in such a hurry when I was about to touch it? It's because just at that time I was in the process of connecting to the feather so that the mana container would be attached to me. I was afraid that something would happen in the process if you suddenly touched the feather, that's why I subconsciously put it away. Xietain said without even thinking about his words. Ahem. Lilith was still suspicious about Xietan's strange attitude but temporarily decided to leave it at that for now. She would raise questions about it later. Xietain sighed relieved in his heart. It was a good thing that Lilith had not seen the records of the Feather of the Frozen End, because he had plans for that feather. Although it was a legend-grade treasure, unfortunately, it was of no use to Xietain at all, since despite being intended for combat it was only focused on soul evolvers with strong ice skills. Even if Xietain wanted to benefit from the stats it granted, he would first have to learn 5 ice-type skills, something that would definitely not be happening considering that he had a greater affinity for fire and lightning than ice, not to mention the fact that he would not be willing to spend 5 precious skill slots of scroll skills that did not fit his path. Since the legend-grade treasure wasn't good for him, Xietain decided its owner right away. Still, 200 points to each stat, 1,200 stat points in total. as expected of a legend-grade treasure. Suddenly, Xietain began to feel even more enthusiasm and curiosity towards this dungeon's treasure. A week later, finally out of that damn snowy area, Xietain raised both arms to the sky and shouted his joy regardless of whether he was exposed or not. He had been in that icy biome for 8 whole days and was about to go crazy. Although Xietain did not know if in the other 3 cardinal points of the dungeon the biome and the monsters were the same as what he had experienced, what he did know was that the number of competitors for the treasure was now much smaller. During the past few days, Xietain found the frozen corpses of at least 300 soul evolvers, and among them, there was no shortage of humans. The only thing that relieved him was that among the frozen corpses he did not find any familiar faces, so even though he was a bit worried, Xietain managed to continue his route without any problems. The only thing that relieved but at the same time made him feel disappointed was the fact that the Arctic asterisk he killed during the second day on that biome seemed to be the only one in that area, or at least it was a rarity among rarities since Xietain did not come across another one. The enemies in that area were another type of snow and ice type P*Chem*N, all of them were first order level 50 creatures. Those snow type monsters dropped an item called Rank 2 Ice Pearl, and similar to the Rank 2 Lightning Pearl, it served to raise the level of an ice type skill by 1 as long as one consumed 10 ice pearls consecutively in the same day. Of course, the skill had to be below the second order or there would be no effect at all even if one consumed 1,000 pearls. After more than half a month of being inside the dungeon, Xietain faced a new type of biome. This biome was a mix between desert and grassland as there was a lot of dry land with nothing in sight but there were many mountains with trees and grass surrounding them. Xietain had barely been in the new territory for about 30 minutes when he suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of an explosion coming from up ahead. He stopped for a moment, and after a brief pause of consideration decided to go and take a look just in case. Boom! A thunderous explosion shook the earth and the 2 soul evolvers that clashed with a mighty collision of swords recoiled. One of them was a demon with the face of a snake but a viped body as robust as that of a rhinoceros. His name was Orzon and he ranked 9th among the demon generals of the demon race. His main weapon was a large heavy sword. As for the enemy the demon faced, it turned out to be a human. However, the curious thing about this human was that its entire body seemed to be encased in futuristic-looking golden armor and even its swords were actually golden sabers. Judging by the design of the armor, this human was a male. The human was forced to retreat more than 50 meters while Orzon only 30, the difference was more than obvious. However, the human was not interested in continuing to fight against the demon general as he turned and tried to head to a specific place as if he was in a hurry for something. Unfortunately, the demon general was not only stronger but also faster so it didn't take him long to catch up. Keek. To think that strange armor can boost your power so much and allow you to fight me for so long even though you're just a little second-order riffraff. Orzon chuckled and used his long tongue to lick his lips. The demon general didn't seem eager to attack for some reason either. Bastard! The human in armor roared furiously as he knew the reason why the demon general simply wanted to obstruct his path instead of actually killing him. His name was Gulim and he came from a very humble family from the Pre-Sun Kingdom to the west of Eventide World. Gulim's talent was not very high and on his own he would never have reached his current level using normal methods, however. From a very young age he was good at mixing with technology and mechanics so after many years of hard work and effort he managed to create a combat suit armor that over time he improved as he found better materials. It was only thanks to his armor that he had reached level 67 at the age of 27. The problem was that his armor in its maximum condition, despite allowing him to fight a demon general for a brief period of time, drained too much energy and soon the core that was a second-order soul stone would be depleted. Gulim looked past the demon general Orzon. About 600 meters ahead was another demon general. This demon general was much more powerful than Orzon and Gulim knew that he could not defeat Orzon, not to mention the demon general beyond. However, Gulim still decided to step forward when he saw what was about to happen. He would rather die than let the demons have their way when the victim involved was a woman of his race, a human. Kigdrag! Bastard! Under the helmet of his armor, Gulim's eyes were bloodshot and without hesitation he pushed forward again only to be stopped once more by the demon general Orzon. You stay there and wait, restless boy. The bull-headed demon general, Kigdrag, licked the white swan neck of the woman under his body who was struggling to free herself as he said with depraved lust, as soon as I am done with this woman I will see to it that I rip off every limb of you slowly. Kigdrag's large right hand was squeezing the girl's throat hard enough to keep her from screaming but not hard enough to kill her. He saw those beautiful eyes filled with horror looking back at him and couldn't help but smile proudly. Beautiful princess, I told you you would be mine, do you remember? I'm just keeping my promise. Princess Bianca looked into the big bull eyes of the demon general Kigdrag, and her blue eyes were covered with tears that fell down her beautiful face without stopping for a second. She couldn't move or scream, she couldn't even kill herself because of the overwhelming power difference between her and her captor. Even if Bianca would rather kill herself than let a demon stain her purity, she didn't have the power. Even though she had worked so hard and had left the safety of her castle, stubbornly insisting her father and mother to come to the dungeon in search of strength. Although she had finally managed to reach the second order recently, it wasn't enough at all. Hearing the sound of her dress being ripped apart bit by bit, Bianca closed her eyes, causing tears to fall even harder than before. She tried to bite her tongue, but she couldn't even move her jaw. Thousands of thoughts and images ran through her head. Bianca used to be indifferent to love or similar feelings. She had always thought that she would marry a talented and powerful prince of a great kingdom who would make honor to her title as the most beautiful young woman in the world, as well as her status as princess of the Lidora kingdom. She was proud, arrogant, and looked down on anyone who did not have high-level blood. However, recently she had rethought many things in her life and her attitude towards others after the events in Gales. The heart of the princess of the Lidora kingdom was filled with bitterness, as if a snake had bitten it. She was just trying to turn over a new leaf and become a better person, but just at that moment life seemed to decide to punish her in the worst way, a way that was even worse than death itself. Soon, Bianca's magic robe was completely torn by Kigdrag's powerful hands, and the wind made her skin bristle even more than it already was due to the fear and the feeling of humiliation she felt. Kigdrag looked at the porcelain-smooth white skin of the woman underneath his body and could not help but lick his lips. He enjoyed human beauties very much, not only because they were relatively more beautiful than females of the demon race usually, but Kigdrag also enjoyed their expressions of terror, so he took his time with them. Especially with a top-quality product like the one he had just coincidentally caught. "This brother, please lend a hand here." The anxious yet slightly hopeful voice of the annoying armored human made Kigdrag's movement stop for a moment. His eyes widened slightly in surprise at the sight of a silhouette charging towards him with an expression brimming with fury. At the same time, the eyes of the princess of the Lidora kingdom opened abruptly when she heard the words of the human man who had jumped in to help her, and the only reason she had not yet been tarnished. "You demons are truly the lowest and vilest creatures I have ever met in my entire life. Kigdrag, I have come to take your dog's head." The princess's eyes finally gleamed with hope at the sound of that voice. However, how could Bianca not recognize that voice? The owner of that voice was the main reason why she had rethought so many things about her past attitude and had decided to change for the better. That voice was absolutely unmistakable to Bianca. Even if she was reduced to ashes, she was confident she would recognize the man owner of that voice. Chapter 865 by Xietain LVL 50 vs Demon General Kigdrag LVL 156. When Xietain arrived at a clearing a few seconds later, replete with craters and shattered trees from the ongoing battle or some other previous battle, what he saw made his blood begin to boil to the point that for a brief second he worried for his own safety. This was the first time Xietain had ever been so angry, other than when one of his loved ones was in danger or hurt. Xietan's anger at present had even surpassed his anger towards Emperor Thanath and the Azura race. "This brother, please lend a hand here." Xietain heard the anxious and even pleading voice of the human warrior who was trying to break through the perimeter of the snake-headed demon general to help Princess Bianca, who had practically been stripped of all her clothes at this moment. However, the other party didn't know that even if he didn't ask for help, Xietain didn't plan to walk out of here without taking the heads of the two demons. Bang! The ground beneath his feet exploded and dozens of cracks spread out everywhere as his body turned into a fuzzy blur. When his eyes met the slightly surprised but lustful eyes of the bull-headed demon general, Xietan's anger finally burst out completely. "You demons are truly the lowest and vilest creatures I have ever met in my entire life. Kigdrag, I have come to take your dog's head." This was the second time Xietain wanted to annihilate a race so badly. He was willing to bear the sin if it meant preventing such pests from spreading more and causing incommensurable suffering. Kaka. Kigdrag stood up, not before slapping Princess Bianca and knocking her unconscious. "To think that I couldn't find you for 2 weeks even though I actively searched for you, but you actually sent you to me. Very good." Kigdrag's eyes filled with murderous intent as he grabbed his giant axe and charged forward instead of waiting for his enemy to reach him. Bull rush! Kigdrag's body moved forward so fast that his agility surpassed Xietan's by almost double for a brief instant. His enemies were always taken by surprise by this move. However, Kigdrag was shocked when his horns struck nothing but air. Suddenly, he sensed great danger from his back and a flash of disbelief shone in his pupils. Crimson flame. Boom! Critical hit. Kigdrag's body was sent flying over 400 meters after being hit directly in the back by annihilation of the falling sky in its greatsword form. After hitting Kigdrag by taking him by surprise using Shadow Blink to appear in his shadow, Xietain immediately activated Crimson Flash Lightning and his agility shot up as he dashed after the demon general without giving him time to react. Bang! 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 Kigdrag's body slammed ferociously into the ground 4 times, leaving large holes in the process before he managed to stop himself using the strength of his legs and hand. He had barely managed to get to his feet when he heard the crackling of lightning and the wind howling around him. Kigdrag's natural sense of danger activated automatically, and together with his several centuries of combat experience he managed to raise his giant axe diagonally right where his enemy would hit in an instant. Xietain's expression was fierce. Seeing that his attack would not hit the enemy's body but would impact against the axe, Xietain released his grip on the weapon and let it continue its course as he chased behind. Boom! Kigdrag's brows furrowed slightly as he felt a slight numbness in his arms after receiving the enemy attack. His legs slid backwards, leaving 2 long strips on the ground for over 70 meters, but just as he lifted his head, he felt a sharp amount of pain in his abdomen. Boom! As his body was sent flying backwards, Kigdrag managed to catch a glimpse of Xietain slowly retracting his knee. It's not enough, it's still not enough. Xietain was determined to make his enemy suffer humiliation and pain he had never experienced in his life. Swoosh! He reached back and used his own mana to draw his weapon, save that annihilation of the falling sky was now a golden whip of great length. Boom! Kigdrag's body hit a hard surface and a slight sound of pain slipped out of his mouth automatically. Even though his body was incredibly hard and tough so he had no visible wounds, the pain was really unbearable because the other party's attacks were really fierce and vicious. Just when Kigdrag was planning to move, he noticed that something was wrong. He could not move. What the chains? Kigdrag tried to break free, but to his frustration, he soon realized that when a chain was shattered by his great physical strength, a new one replaced it immediately. It was then that the demon general realized that the hard surface he had struck was a crimson wall made of blood. Bang! 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 The sound of the wind bursting into pieces as it was blown through something quickly caught Kigdrag's attention, and when he looked forward all he saw was a golden flash before a great amount of sharp pain coming from his chest made him grunt. Boom! You demons like to humiliate and rape females, don't you? Xietain swung his right arm with such speed that the golden whip in his hand became a blur, leaving superimposed images each time he swung forward. Boom! 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 In just 1 second, Xietain had struck over 800 times towards making use of all his agility and strength. Arg! Even someone as tenacious and sturdy as Kigdrag couldn't deal with all that immediate pain that hit his nerves and brain in such a short time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 seconds. In just 10 seconds, Kigdrag's body had been hit over 8,000 times and his skin, which was even tougher than diamonds, finally began to tear and blood to run down his shredded leather armor. Little ant. Kigdrag finally lost his patience and activated more than 7 skills at once. Boom! The wall of blood exploded next to the chains and all that blood evaporated in an instant as the demon general's body was engulfed by a strange flame aura. I won't kill you, I will definitely let you live to see how all your loved ones suffer at my hands. Xietain's movements stopped for a brief second upon hearing the demon general's threat, and it was in that brief moment that the now much more powerful Kigdrag managed to close the distance and strike with his battle axe directly into his chest. Boom! Xietan's body was sent flying backwards for over half a kilometer before hitting the ground and starting to roll. That's it. The demon general Orzon, who had been watching the combat with lingering fear, finally managed to sigh in relief as he saw Kigdrag take the lead as it was supposed to be. He had wanted to go to Kigdrag's assistance, but the human he had been holding back all this time as if it were a game was now holding him back even at the cost of suffering damage. Gulim knew that the newly arrived human was his only hope of survival along with Princess Bianca, therefore, seeing him in trouble, he tried to go to help. Where's the rush? Let's dance. Of course, Orzon wouldn't let him and the two soon began to fight again, causing the earth to shake and split with every clash of their weapons. Kigdrag was a soul evolver purely focused on melee and his main stats were strength and stamina, but as he activated his stronger combat skills, his agility was nothing to scoff at either. He chased after, but when he was halfway there his steps stopped as he noticed something was wrong with the human. Xietain slowly stood up. He didn't even seem to feel pain in his chest even though his armor had sunk slightly inward after receiving the fierce attack of a soul evolver above level 150 with the capacity to leap levels thanks to the purity of his soul power and skills in sync. Blood Berserker's Wrath, first switch has been triggered automatically, threatens loved ones. Pain receptors are blocked. Increases all stats by 400 points naturally. Secondary effect, 10% loss of rationality is weakened by the effect of your Brilliant Mind title. Secondary effect, 10% loss of rationality is weakened by the passive effect of your immovable heart skill. Weirdly, even though the most terrifying skill within Xietain's arsenal had been triggered, he did not feel any kind of loss of rationality but suddenly calmed down. Xietain casually spat out the blood in his mouth and looked at Qigdrag with his eyes now as red as the blood he had just spat out. When his big eyes met those two cold red eyes, Qigdrag's sense of danger began to shoot up much more strongly than before. However, his anger was too high to pay attention to it. Die! Qigdrag did not hesitate to charge forward and raise his axe high as he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Radical strike!" Seeing the incoming attack, Xietain simply moved his body slightly to the left with his eyes still fixed on the demon general's eyes. Boom! The giant axe struck the ground just an inch from Xietan's foot. The earth split and sank, causing both Xietan's and Qigdrag's bodies to sink together along with the rumbling ground. Swoosh! Swoosh! Xietain extended both hands forward at lightning speed, and before Qigdrag could step back he felt two firm pincer-like grips grasping at his two horns. Swoosh! Qigdrag was forced to lean forward and down as he was suddenly pulled by the horns. Before his wide eyes, the enemy's knee from which protruded a terrifying-looking blade grew larger and larger. Boom! Ah! Followed by an explosion that expelled all the air from around the center of the impact outward as a shockwave form, a blood-chilling shriek echoed within the destroyed forest. My eye! My eye! As Qigdrag wailed over the loss of his right eye, another knee strike struck him. Boom! Critical hit. Arg! The new pain seemed to awaken the demon general, who in a fit of rage tried to free himself, and seeing that his enemy's hands were as hard as steel, he began to use his giant fists to fiercely punch the human's ribs with the intention of forcing him to let go of his horns. Qigdrag's punches were truly terrifying considering his strength was currently over 650 points. However, Xietain did not feel any pain at all, therefore, he continued to use his knee to strike upwards while using his hands to force the demon general Qigdrag's head downwards. Boom! 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 For a full minute, Orzon and Gulim, who had been fighting fiercely, seemed to tactically decide to separate. The two looked on with pallid faces at what appeared to be a confrontation between two madmen. Every time Qigdrag's heavy punches landed on the sides of Xietan's body, the latter's body trembled slightly. However, the power behind his knee strikes was far from decaying in contrast to Qigdrag's punches, which were getting weaker with every attack he took. After 5 minutes and seeing that Qigdrag's attacks had become nothing more than caresses since they did not even cause blasts, Orzon did not hesitate to turn around and run away. Unfortunately for him, this time it was Gulim who didn't want to let him go. Ha 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 ha. What's the rush, oh, great demon general? Let's dance. Damn human, since you are so eager to die, then let me send you on your way. Today, the great demon general Qigdrag and Orzon will fall before us, humans. Let the entire demon race know the consequences of acting so rampantly. Although Gulim was in a clear disadvantage, his attacks were no joke at all, and more than a few times he managed to hit Orzon and inflict wounds on his sturdy body. The two were like shadows flashing across the battlefield, one mainly chasing and the other trying to escape, even though it was the weaker one who was chasing. After about 10 minutes, Qigdrag's attacks had completely stopped and his arms fell helplessly to his sides. Critical hit. With a final knee strike, half of the demon general's head caved in, its hard skull cracked, and the scythe belonging to a third-order weaver ant on Xietan's knee finally turned the brain into mush. You have received the soul power of third-order Qigdrag level 156. Xietain slowly loosened his grip on the demon general's horns and took a step to the side as he watched the corpse of his enemy slump to the ground, raising dust in the process. If there is next life, then you better remember not to threaten my loved ones again, you fucking dog that barks but has no strength to bite. Chapter 866 Dark Mist. Gulim was stunned as he stared at the body of the demon general Qigdrag on the ground, lifeless, with his head sunk inward and purple blood running free in his surroundings. The demon general Qigdrag, the third most powerful soul evolver of the entire demon race if one did not include the demon lord, was killed? Gulim could not believe it even though he had witnessed the battle and was seeing the now weakened body after the loss of most of its records. However, a few seconds later, reality slowly began to be accepted by his brain. Gulim's grip on his two laser swords tightened and his whole body began to tremble. His eyes turned bloodshot red as he stared intently at the body of the demon general and didn't even bother to contain his joy and ecstasy. Now that's what I call a good kill, fuck his mother. Gulim hated demons because he knew how cruel and bloodthirsty they were. They sometimes simply killed for the simple sake of enjoying the suffering of others and raped females of all races, with their favorite being human females. However, Gulim mainly hated the demon lord and the 10 demon generals who were the real reason why the demon race behaved in such a way. Kigdrag's outrageous acts were widely known throughout Eventide world. The number of families that were destroyed under the hands of the bull-headed demon general was too high to be counted, and the number of women who committed suicide after being defiled was even higher. Unfortunately, Kigdrag was simply too powerful, and even the kings of kingdoms preferred to avoid clashing with him as long as the safety of the entire kingdom was not harmed. Therefore, he had done as he pleased. Until today. That damned bastard Kigdrag had finally gotten what he deserved. Finally someone with the balls and the strength to put an end to his arrogance and put an end to his cruelty with even more cruelty. Bang! Hearing the sound of a bang near him, Gulim turned around and anxiously shouted, "Shit." He was so happy and excited about the demon general Kigdrag's death and the fact that he could go on living that he ended up neglecting the demon general Orzon. Gulim ignored the pain in his body and his wounds. He pushed his speed to the limit in an attempt to catch up, but under his eyes filled with fury and frustration, all he could see was Orzon getting further and further away to the point where he would soon escape his line of sight completely. Just at that moment, Gulim felt a great fluctuation of magic from the sky. The magic fluctuation was so great that his footsteps subconsciously stopped and his face turned white as he realized that the attack being charged had more than enough force to kill him 1,000 times over if he was hit. He raised his head abruptly, and there he saw him. His human companion, who had appeared at the most correct moment of all, was now in the sky, barely being pulled by the gravitational force of the world, while holding a spear surrounded by blue flames. Xietain narrowed his eyes and kept silent for a few seconds while looking at the back of the demon general Orzon. After carefully calculating the throwing trajectory and making calculations to deduce the enemy's next location based on his current speed and based on his throwing force, as well as the dungeon's gravitational force, which was the same as Eventide worlds, Xietain finally swung his right arm fiercely forward and threw the spear with all his strength. Crimson Blood Judgment had a cooldown time of 7 days and had just recently come off cooldown, but he was already using it again. More than 2 kilometers away, the demon general Orzon, who was running for his life still feeling disbelief at the death of the third most powerful demon general of his entire race, suddenly felt a chill running down his back. Orzon abruptly turned around and opened his mouth wide as he anxiously shouted the activation of one of his most powerful skills. Dark Breath. Dark black flames shot out from the demon general Orzon's snake-like mouth and, just like the breath of a true dragon, flew into the sky at lightning speed. Rumble. For an instant, the blue fire spear was stopped by the black flame breath. However, that stalemate was becoming harder to endure for the demon general Orzon, as even after having consumed 70% of his total mana, the blue fire spear continued its slow but sure descent. "You damn demon scum! Do a favor to the world and die." The pupils of the snake-headed demon general shrank to the size of needles as the enraged roar of the human in the sky shook his entire world. Suddenly, the magic power of the spear engulfed by blue flames sharply increased, and his dark flame breath was immediately torn apart as the spear cut it in two. Boom! Rumble! Ugh, fuck! Gulim was immediately hit by the first shockwave and automatically spat out blood as his body flew backwards. Gulim quickly struggled to his feet under the constant tremor of the ground that seemed to shake as if an earthquake of the highest degree was striking the entire world, before dashing off in the opposite direction of the explosion. Boom! Boom! Gulim's body was hit by 2 more shockwaves and again spat out blood as he stumbled. His face was pale as a sheet, and despite the pain and the urge to faint, he dared not stop, because when he looked over his shoulder, his heart grew full of fear as he saw that everything of what had previously been there was now gone and had been consumed by what appeared to be a world of blue flames that kept spreading. Unfortunately, the second-order soul stone that Gulim was using as the main power source for his combat suit armor was already old and worn out. Therefore, when he pushed his movement speed far beyond his normal agility stat, the drain finally reached its peak. Under Gulim's shocked eyes, the soul stone on the armor's chest turned to dust after exploding. The weight on his body immediately increased, his strength plummeted, and his movement speed greatly decreased. Bang! The sudden change of pace coupled with the shaking of the ground caused Gulim to be unable to stand upright. His body fell and rolled on the ground for several tens of meters before coming to a stop. Just before he was swallowed by the blue flames, and just as his eyes were closing from both mental and physical exhaustion, Gulim sighed in relief and with fear lingering in his heart. The last image he saw was that of all the blue flames flying into the sky, gathering and dancing around the young soul evolver who seemed to float among the clouds. Truly, That image would remain engraved in his memory probably until the day of his death. Xietain deactivated gravity manipulation when he was a short distance from the ground. The color of his eyes had returned to normal as he killed the cause why the first switch of Blood Berserker's Wrath skill was triggered. Ugh! He couldn't help but grunt slightly and frown. Now that the pain receptors in his body had been activated again, the pain of being mercilessly beaten by the demon General Kigdrag's fists naturally began to take its toll on him. If not for his high-quality equipment and high natural physical defense, Xietan's current injuries would not be light but would definitely be in the medium grade at the very least. After all, he had taken over 10,000 punches to the rib and abdomen area from a level 156 soul evolver. Even if they were just normal punches, Kigdrag's strength was undoubtedly frighteningly high. Xietain, are you okay? It's just physical pain, don't worry my little succubus. Xietain nodded and slowly began to move towards Bianca. She's fine, she just lost consciousness. Lilith said, looking at the naked princess with a complicated expression on her face, though. I wonder if she'll be able to keep her mental state healthy once she wakes up. Well, she was almost raped by that fucking beast. Xietain sighed and took out a large sheet from his storage ring. He covered the body of the princess of the Prowling Kingdom and lifted her up before walking towards the golden-armored human. For now we can only do this much for her. As for the rest, I'm afraid it's out of our hands. I guess you're right. Xietain gently laid Princess Bianca's body on the ground next to the man in golden armor. He looked at the armor and couldn't help but be curious. This thing looks like an armor used by knights, but it's clearly advanced technology, there are even several circuits all over it. He squatted down and with great difficulty found a way to pull the helmet off. Oh? He looks quite young, under 30 probably. Xietain was a little surprised to see that the other party was so young. He was slowly learning to discern the real age of people based on their appearance and levels. Of course, this also depended on the purity of the other party's soul power, which made it more complicated and closer to an approximation of the real age than the real age itself. Xietain picked up Kigdrag's giant axe, which was actually a rank 3 forged weapon with over 9,500 physical attack points and good options. It was an excellent heavy weapon for soul evolvers focused on strength. Zhongda or Nangongi would surely put this giant axe to good use. He found a soul stone in Kigdrag's head, but unfortunately, the demon General Orzon did not have one, at least. However, he had dropped a scroll with the skill Dark Mist. Dark Mist, second order active skill, level 1, releases a powerful mist around you that will weaken all enemies trapped within the mist. Enemies within Dark Mist will suffer weak attacks, blindness, and mana corruption. Consumes 50 mana points per second after activating and has no cooldown time. Weak attack, reduces the power of physical attacks by 10%. Blindness, obstructs the vision of enemies whose level does not exceed the user's by more than 10. Mana corruption, magic skills of the same order of the skill or lower will have a 20% chance to fail. Loses 1% of mana every second. Good skill. Xietan's eyes lit up at the description of the skill and its effects. He decided to keep the skill Dark Mist to himself. He would learn it when he finally became a second-order soul evolver, along with the skill Life Drain after his slots for learning skills from scrolls expanded to 20 slots from the current 5. The more he thought about it, the more Xietain realized what kind of anomaly he was. Damn it, I have almost 3 times the number of active skills that a first-order existence should have. You're finally realizing the fact that you're an irregularity? Lilith was speechless. You thought it's a normal thing for someone level 50 to be able to handle soul evolvers above level 150? Not everyone has a magic skill destructive enough to wipe out the life of a third-order powerhouse with a single strike. Ha ha ha, I guess I really am that awesome after all. I'll really beat you up. Xietain looked at the surroundings several times before scratching his head and saying in bewilderment, now, how am I supposed to carry these two? He wouldn't have to carry 2 unconscious people the whole way, or would he? Although Xietain wasn't cruel enough to leave 2 humans lying on the street knowing that the dungeon was fraught with danger, carrying 2 dead weights didn't sound like a good plan for him either. Since Gulim seemed to be kind enough to risk his life for a fellow human, Xietain would give him a few points for that. As for Princess Bianca, although he didn't have a good impression of her, what he saw made him subconsciously want to at least let her calm down a bit before leaving her on her own. Just as he was in a dilemma, a shadow that partially covered the sun flew over his head, and as he raised his face, Xietain was taken aback before laughing heartily. Xietain remembered seeing this flying mount before, and apart from the demon lord's mount, it was the one that left the biggest impression on him. Moreover, this mount was Gulim's. Xietain remembered it clearly now that he saw it again. Winged mouse friend, you have come just at a good time. That's right. A large black mouse with white wings slowly descended from the sky and stopped beside Gulim. Seeing the giant black mouse using its nose to gently move Gulim's body as if asking him to get up quickly, Xietain finally sighed in relief now that the problem of how to carry the two people had been solved. Chapter 867. A mere second sometimes means too late. A week later. Inside a cave deep inside a mountain, a group of 3 people and a mutant beast were sitting around a campfire while enjoying their dinner. "Oh!" one of them exclaimed with a scream that made the female jump in fright at the sudden outburst. "You? Oh, sorry, ahem. It's just that this meat is really delish," apologized the guy. "To you everything is delicious, isn't it? You always make a big fuss over everything even if it's just a fruit that fell off the tree." The young man cleared his throat and wriggled a little uncomfortably. He wisely decided not to pursue the matter further but instead took another bite of the roasted kebab in his hand as he mumbled through his teeth. Xietain looked at Gulim and the princess of the Lidora kingdom in silence as he enjoyed his dinner. It was SN*RL*X meat that was surprisingly not only delicious but had the effect of restoring 5 stamina points per second every 100 grams of meat for 30 seconds as long as it was not eaten in the middle of a battle and the consumer was comfortably seated enjoying a meal. As expected of a lazy slacker who only knew how to eat and sleep. 7 days had passed since Xietain killed the demon general Kigdrag and the demon general Orzon. Princess Bianca had awakened 2 days after she had fainted from being slapped by Kigdrag. Although her physical body did not have any injuries worthy of leaving her in a coma for 48 hours, her mental condition was not good, so that was probably the reason why she only woke up 2 days after the great battle was over. When Bianca woke up days ago, her reaction was not at all as Xietain expected, but from a certain point of view, it was not too far off either. Her beautiful face wrinkled and her eyes pursed as well as her lips before she burst into tears, throwing herself at him like a bullied little kid looking for the reassurance of her family. Xietain once had the intention of pushing her away, but with Lilith's support and his prompt understanding of how difficult Princess Bianca's situation was, he simply let her cry as she hugged him. At the end of the day, she could only rely on him and Gulim until she was reunited with her father and the other soul evolvers who had come into the dungeon. As for Gulim, he awoke exactly 1 day after the princess of the Lidora kingdom opened her eyes. Although Gulim's injuries were of medium grade, he had absorbed a certain part of the soul power of the demon general Orzon after Xietain killed him, therefore, his level had leveled up and he surely received a natural boost in his health stat that increased his healing rate. At that time, Xietain had planned to separate from the duo and continue his own path, even ignoring Princess Bianca's implores. However, it was Gulim who managed to change his mind. At that time, Gulim said the following: "Big brother, how about teaming up?" "No. Besides, you are older than me. Don't take years off in an attempt to look youthful." This was Xietan's reply. "I'm just 27. Gulim defended himself before quickly continuing, "Be that as it may, big brother, listen to me first." And for a whole hour, Xietain listened to the 1001 reasons Gulim had to convince him to team up. Of course, Xietain ignored the reasons like "I am extremely handsome and I will surely attract beautiful girls for you, big brother," but focused on the few crucial points that were true. 1. Gulim was strong. He only needed a second-order soul stone to be able to restrain a demon general for a few minutes. If he had a third-order soul stone, he might even be able to fight on equal footing against an existence on the level of the killed demon general Belgos. His help would certainly be more than welcome in combat, especially in the final battle that would surely break out for the treasure. 2. Gulim had his winged mouse. Although the winged mouse did not have any outstanding ability compared to the dangers inside the dungeon as it was only a level 51 mutant beast, the mutant beast was surprisingly really agile and speedy in the sky. This was a fact that Xietain had checked for himself when he carried Gulim and Bianca on the mouse's back after killing the 2 demon generals. Xietain could avoid several headaches and would have a better view of the whole world if he had the flying mouse with him. Realizing this fact made Xietain regret a little about leaving the bats behind. As for Princess Bianca, Xietain wasn't cruel enough to kick her out of the party after what she had just experienced, not to mention the fact that she definitely wouldn't manage to survive for long now that they had gone so deep into the dungeon and the level of the enemies was getting higher and higher. Besides, Princess Bianca was surprisingly very good at cooking, even better than Qin Ming, Xietan's housekeeper, and even better than the castle servants of the royal family of Gales. She prepared the most delicious meals he had ever tasted in his entire life. Having a good chef in the group certainly wasn't that bad. Besides, it wasn't as if Bianca was useless in combat since she was a level 57 second-order mage whose purity of soul power and magic power made her comparable to a normal second-order soul evolver at level 80. Not to mention that as a mage she possessed skills capable of taking down numerous enemies in record time. However, this meat is really mouth-watering. Xietain couldn't help but nod. I have eaten this meat before meeting you for several days and it didn't taste this good. My cooking abilities aren't the best, but at least my cooking skill is at first order level 4 right now. He looked at Princess Bianca in a slightly better light than before, as his impression of her was far from positive, having seen her slap a maid in the back of the castle back in Gales. Wow, that's pretty impressive, big brother. My skill cooking is barely unclassified level 3. Gulim casually commented as he wiped his mouth with his palm before taking another bite of meat and starting to speak with his mouth full. I really don't understand how someone as strong as you can have time to cook. I barely even shower. Pig. Bianca snorted under her breath. We're soul evolvers, aren't we? It's not like we have to shower often. Gulim argued back. Bianca rolled her eyes. At first, she had done her best to respect Gulim, because it was largely thanks to him that she was still pure. However, every minute he spoke made Bianca's image of the knight in golden armor crack more and more. Now, 4 days after meeting and interacting with each other, the image of Gulim in her eyes had shattered like a mirror falling from a 20-story building. Even then, she respected him considerably and felt extremely grateful to him. She looked at Xietain and said, a little embarrassed, actually. I really like cooking, so since I was little I've spent a lot of time in the kitchen together with my mother. Oh? That's quite surprising. To be honest, I didn't expect it. Xietain raised an eyebrow. He was really surprised. The image of Bianca in his mind was that of a snobbish brat, but at least she knew how to cook and strived for her goals in her own way. Bianca forced a smile and said in a low voice, I know my image to you is not the best, and you have all the reasons in the world. However, I'm really trying to change for the better now. I see. I'm happy for you. Xietain nodded without much interest. At the end of the day, whether Bianca became a better person or not was up to her, and Xietain wouldn't be affected by her actions anyway. Princess, may I know what level your cooking skill is at? Gulim asked without stopping eating the meat. My god, this meat is the delicacy of the gods. Xietain looked at him and felt a little speechless. Although the skill cooking had little to do with one's combat strength, asking so casually about another person's skill level was not seen as a good thing, and in fact, it was considered impolite not only on Earth but also in this world. Surprisingly, Bianca didn't say too much this time and instead answered honestly and with some pride in her voice, my skill cooking is currently at 3rd order level 3. I can even add positive side effects to some potions at this point. Cough. 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 Gulim spat out the meat and almost choked to death. Xietain also froze for a moment and looked at Princess Bianca in increasing surprise. He had cooked for himself for a long time, so he knew that the skill cooking did not level up simply by cooking. The fact that Princess Bianca had managed to raise her skill to the point where it could even slightly affect another field, which was alchemy, was a truly impressive feat. Just at that moment, a clear explosion resounded in the distance and everyone's expression abruptly changed. Gulim put down the meat he was eating and quickly walked to a corner where he immediately began to put on his combat suit armor. He didn't rely on his personal strength, therefore, he felt more comfortable in his armor even if he didn't activate its power, especially in such a dangerous place like this. I'll go first. Xietain turned into a blur without waiting for anyone and quickly disappeared. Princess Bianca followed him, and moments later so did Gulim, who despite being able to run faster stayed relatively close to her just in case. Xietain sped up more and more as he began to feel a bad premonition in his heart. The sound of explosions was becoming clearer and clearer, which meant that he was getting closer and closer to the battlefield. However, when Xietain finally reached the area covered by craters and smoke, as well as bright flames burning all around, he froze and looked forward with eyes wide with disbelief. There was no more battle, there was only a dying person on the ground. No. In fact, there was never any battle in the first place. Xietain realized from the amount of missed attacks and the wounds on the dying person's body that this was more about someone running away from someone else's chase. As for the other existence, he or she fled immediately after sensing Xietan's presence charging towards them. Thanks to all his space lore-related skills, especially his super warrior skill, Xietain was sure that the other party had activated a teleportation skill or used some treasure, since the space in the surroundings was slightly unstable. Xietain knew the person who was dying, and the other person also recognized him immediately. However, it was natural for the two of them to recognize each other. Not only had they come all the way from the distant Gales kingdom to enter this dungeon, but she was someone who in her own way had been on the same battlefield with Xietain against the demons on the outskirts of Bearcrest City. What made Xietain feel worse was that he had arrived seconds late. Chapter 868 Death, Vow, Blazing Punishment of Divine Blood. The increasingly dull sparkle in the girl's pretty dark-colored eyes seemed to flare up a little more strongly for a moment as she saw and recognized the young man standing no more than 2 meters ahead of her. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but the wounds on her body were probably worse than she even knew. Cough! Cough! The girl did not give up and tried again to speak several times as if what she wanted to say to Xietain was even more important than her life that was quickly fading faster and faster with each of her coughs, just like a dying flame being whipped by cruel ice-cold winds. Seeing the girl coughing up blood with fragments of internal organs, Xietain closed his eyes and sighed in his heart. The feeling of sadness that suddenly flooded him made him feel like tearing everything apart to drive away the weight that suddenly hung on his chest. Xietain walked over to the girl and lay down on the ground next to her. She looked at him silently for 1 or 2 seconds before closing her eyes. A lone tear slid down her cheek as she realized that not only was she going to die but that she would not even be able to say or even move her hands to write on the dirt that extremely important message, the real reason why she was in her current condition. In the end, she was simply able to lie in silence as she looked up into the dark sky with eyes brimming with sadness but most of all anger and remorse that unfortunately, no one but her could understand. This girl was none other than the young and timid but talented assassin, Kat. Although Xietain and she had not exchanged more than 2 or 3 words during the entire time they had known each other, the two had been battle peers for better or worse. It was impossible for him not to feel sad to see a girl no more than 20 years old whose talent should take her to the pinnacle of glory fading fast. Kat was very quiet due to her shyness and fear of the world in general, however, she was very, very fearless. Xietain even remembered the time he saw her sharing the candy she had just bought with a little kid who was crying in the streets of the city after getting lost. It was thanks to Kat, who without a single word made the lost kid return to his family. Bianca and Gulim finally arrived on the scene just a few seconds later. At first, the two were startled to see Xietain lying on the floor next to a wounded person. However, the two soon recognized the girl who had been by his side before they entered the dungeon. The two exchanged glances and noticed the complicated expression on the other's face. Neither of them said anything, they simply remained silent several feet away, not wanting to interrupt what they knew were the last moments the girl would be able to hear the voice of a living being, and, perhaps fortunately for her, a being close to her. Don't worry, I will take revenge in your place no matter what. I don't know who it was, but I will find them. Whoever it is. Xietain said in a serious voice as his eyes looked up at the dark sky covered in black clouds. It's a promise I'm making to you. Although we can't be considered friends, we have shared the same battlefield against the same enemies. I guess in its own way we're not that far from being friends. Kat said nothing, even if she wanted to she wouldn't be able to. She could feel that these were the last seconds she had left, that's why she used them to breathe as much air as possible, to look as much as possible, and to feel, because soon it would all turn into absolutely nothing. As Xietan's eyes as black as the night itself focused on the darkness that covered perhaps the entire dungeon, he felt the life of the shy and kind girl next to him finally fade away completely. Although Xietain had the blood manipulation skill to stop Kat's internal bleeding, his skill was not at a level where he could make new internal organs grow before her life was turned off. There was nothing he could do, and for the first time in a long time, Xietain realized how powerless he was in the face of death. After several minutes, Xietain slowly stood up and casually wiped away the dirt that had stuck to his head as he looked up at the sky. He knelt down on one knee and with a hand slowly closed Kat's still open eyes. Her body was still warm, but all life was gone from her. Although the body was still present, anyone could tell at a glance that the records that made up her existence had been taken away. After several seconds, Xietain asked seemingly out of nowhere, "Can you tell me who it was? Sure you know who the culprit is?" Gulim exchanged glances with Princess Bianca before carefully asking, "Big brother, are you talking to us?" Xietain simply remained silent in wait for an answer to his previous question. After a few seconds, he heard Lilith's sigh followed by the answer to his question. "I'm afraid I can't do that." After a slight silent pause, Xietain nodded calmly and changed his question, "Could you tell me if the person involved with Kat's death is somehow related to me and my fate?" After being together with Lilith for so long, Xietain had learned a thing or two about her limits that Lilith had been playing with very carefully, barely bordering on them but not really touching them. For example, she could not give him direct answers when the effect of her answer could be the cause for the alteration of the main destiny of a lower existence. This meant that Lilith could help Xietain know how, for example, X skill worked since he would learn it anyway. However, she was not able to tell him the name of someone who tried to assassinate him as it would affect his main destiny too much. Indeed, Lilith's reply did not disappoint him at all. It's good that you're learning more of the limits I have, Xietain. It'll be easier for both of us that way. After a small pause, she said in a serious voice, that's right, the murderer of this little girl is closely related to your fate, that's why I can't give you names. Xietain narrowed his eyes as he listened to Lilith's words. He noticed something about the final part of her sentence that caught his attention. You can't give me names, but... Lilith was pleased and glad that the tactical understanding between the two was growing higher and higher every day. Remember, greed can cause an angel's white wings to turn black when it comes to power. Even the purest existence in the universe would probably be willing to commit the vilest acts if they were promised absolute power. In the apocalypse, as you like to call it, sometimes we need to be warier of those who are near than those who are far away. Those who are far away can't harm us without us not seeing it coming after all. Xietain lowered his head to look at the pretty face of the lifeless girl and nodded, don't worry, I will keep my promise to you at any cost. Even if the answer to this riddle doesn't make me happy. He kept Kat's body in his spatial storage ring. Now that she had lost her life she was considered just another object by the soul record and the laws of the universe. He walked over to Gulim and Bianca, passed them silently, and said in a calm voice, let's go, let's rest for a few hours before we continue moving. The two exchanged glances, and although they had many questions, they both decided that this was not a good moment. In the cave devoid of light, Xietan's cold black eyes were like wolf eyes glowing in the midst of total darkness. While Gulim and Princess Bianca slept, he was sitting on the bare ground resting his back on the wall staring at a fixed point. 3 hours had passed, but he was far from being able to sleep. However, those 3 hours were not a waste as Xietain was now 60% sure who Kat's killer was after carefully studying her wounds and the dark energy that was hidden in her blood. Unfortunately, he couldn't move until he was 100% sure, and, honestly, Xietain preferred to be wrong. Soon, he muttered to himself, his voice echoing in the silence. Soon? Lilith's voice sounded beside him, letting him know that he was not alone in the dark, cold night. Soon I will crash against the demon lord, I can feel it. Every cell in my body is trembling with excitement and my desire for a battle is unbelievably high right now. That's because of your job. Blood Berserker. A berserker at the end of the day. Xietain turned his right hand and 20 tiny third-order soul stones appeared on his palm as the spatial storage ring on his finger glowed briefly. The 20 tiny stones of different colors faintly illuminated the interior of the cave and shone in his black pupils. The total number of third-order soul stones Xietain had was 32, therefore, he basically had 2/3 of his largest wealth in the palm of his hand. Xietain, you don't tell me you're going to do what I'm thinking? Lilith inquired in shock at the sight of his action. Xietain turned his left hand and over 100 second-order soul stones fell into his palm after a slight glow from his storage ring before most of them fell on the ground beside him due to the big number. Really, I wonder if anyone ever managed to evolve this skill before breaking into the fourth order. It's hard to believe that a third-order existence would be lucky enough to fight dozens if not hundreds of battles against other existences of their level and still came out of all of them alive. However, who knows? Lilith sighed, now completely sure of what Xietain was going to do. However, I can guarantee you with my life as a bet that no first-order existence that has had that skill, if other than you there is another one, has managed to evolve a third-order skill to the fourth order, and even if there was he or she probably wouldn't be crazy enough to evolve it. Why? Xietain asked, and at the same time as a series of green letters began to flash in his retina, the entire cave was illuminated as countless unclassified soul stones and first order appeared on the ground. You ask me why? I think you know the answer very well, don't you? Lilith rolled her eyes. Crimson Blood Judgment Skill Evolution Requirements - Kill unclassified existence using blood manipulation, 1,000/1 million. Kill first order existence using blood manipulation, 10.000/10.000. Kill second order existence using fire attacks, 100/100. Kill third order existence using fire attacks, October 10th. Upgrade blood manipulation to third order level 5, complete. Unclassified soul stone, 200,000/200,000. First order soul stone, 2,000/2000. Second order soul stone, 200/200. Third order soul stone, 20/20. All requirements have been completed. Do you wish to evolve the skill third order Crimson Blood Judgment level 5 to the next stage? Easy, my little succubus. Xietain slowly stood up and the soul record seemed to feel his will as all the soul stones around him began to glow brighter and brighter. Even if I destroy this artificial world, it should be okay, shouldn't it? Evolution process begins. Who knows? Maybe it won't be necessary. Or maybe it will. You have acquired the skill Blazing Punishment of Divine Blood. That night, Xietain evolved 2 more skills and spent almost completely all of his 3rd order soul stones, leaving him with barely 5. Chapter 869 Xietain vs Purple Flame Wyvern, Part 1. Approximately 12 hours passed since the night Xietain found Kat on the brink of death, feeling and watching the young girl's life slipping away to death like water through his fingers without him being able to do anything to stop the process. Big brother, be careful. Those monsters are on their way to you now. I got it covered. Oops. Crap, I missed one. Princess, that sucker is heading your way now. Gulim, are you stupid? You only have to hold off a few hundred stone drakes, but you can't even do that much? Learn from Xietain some more. The group of 3 advanced towards the center of the world, straight towards the silver-colored tower that rose into the clouds in an imposing manner. About 5 or 6 hours ago, the tame flying-type mutant beasts had stopped flying for some reason. Without Gulim's giant winged mouse to carry them, the group of 3 had no choice but to move forward on their own 2 feet. To raise their levels and gain some treasures along the way, Xietain proposed to separate sufficiently so that each of them had their own monsters to hunt but not far enough apart that they could not come to each other's aid if something bad happened. Besides, being so close to each other and with their voices communicating, anyone would realize that they were together, therefore, the other soul evolvers would think twice before deciding to trouble them. The monsters they were currently facing were a large group of stone golems that could be dragons or giant snakes with a big stone horn in the center of their foreheads. Of course, they were also P*Chem*Ns, but probably only Xietain knew that. This stone golem was actually on *X, which was a giant rock snake, and they were all between level 40 and 50. Although their movement speed was not particularly high when compared to others, this large rock snake could move underground, and although their attack was not too scary, their defense was something else, not to mention the fact that they could disappear under the earth to quickly heal themselves by absorbing rocks and then return to the surface to continue fighting. After about a day of fighting practically without rest, Xietain for the first time since he arrived in this world felt relatively comfortable teaming up with other people. He was used to existences at the level of Wuijuan, Qinhe, Feng Tianwu, Nangong Fu Xiafeng, Zhongde and others who possessed talent but above all were vicious when it came to making a move. Surprisingly, even the princess of the Lidora kingdom was fierce with her magic attacks and even received some minor injuries when she was surrounded by several on *X, which made her enraged and attack with greater ferocity instead of flinching. Sitting on a fallen tree trunk in front of a campfire, Xietain was looking at the ash-gray rock in his hand while Bianca prepared tonight's dinner and Gulim fed his giant winged mouse. Aubriantine, rank 2, a special ore that can only occasionally be found in dry territories and on earth-type monsters with rock bodies above level 45. This mineral can be surprisingly used to forge equipment, but its greatest advantage lies in building large structures as it feeds off the world's mana to self-repair. Xietain kept the ore in his storage ring, feeling incredibly grateful for the fact that he decided to team up with Gulim and the princess of the Lidora kingdom. While his storage ring had a good amount of space inside, most of that space was already in use with treasures, weapons, food, soul stones, skill scrolls, mutant plants, ores, etc. It was simply impossible for Xietain to store the large amount of aubriantine he obtained from killing the on *X during the day. Fortunately, Xietain had Gulim's giant winged mouse that, despite being a rodent-like mutant creature whose specialty was agility, was actually capable of carrying a lot of weight. The winged mouse was wearing huge mutant beast skins tied around its body and was being used to carry at least 6 or 7 tons of aubriantine in blood carts. Even if its movement speed dropped to the point where the group of 3 had to move slowly so that the mouse could keep up with them, Xietain was not going to give up on an ore that could be used to build walls or houses when he returned to China. The next day, Xietain, Bianca, and Gulim were at the top of a vast canyon covered by mountains and giant trees. In fact, it had been pure coincidence that the 3 of them were heading to this well-hidden area that no one would go to unless by pure accident, since there was nothing special to catch their attention. On the contrary, it would probably be avoided since mountains and forests were good places to get ambushed. Holy fuck, isn't that the Demon Lord's mount? Gulim whispered under his breath as he looked ahead with wide eyes. Bianca's face was slightly pale and the feeling of fear could be seen in her eyes as she looked at the large green clearing at the bottom of the canyon, right in the center. There, a large building at least 50 meters high and 1,000 meters long and wide, built with some kind of white stones, was hidden and silent by the surrounding nature. From the outside, the building looked like an ancient mausoleum or museum where antiques were displayed next to 2 large statues of warriors with swords next to the entrance, each measuring about 20 meters high. Resting comfortably on its large stomach, lying down seemingly enjoying the sunlight. A large dragon-like beast guarded the entrance to the building. The aura of its body was one thing, but the sight of its large size and jet-black scales along with its ferocious face were definitely more than enough to make anyone think twice before deciding to approach and cause problems. Xietain narrowed his eyes and a strange light flashed in his pupils. No one knew what he was thinking. It is said that the strength of the purple flame wyvern is comparable to that of the most powerful demon general of the demon race, which would put it on equal footing with the strongest kings of kingdom in our world. Princess Bianca said with lingering fear. Even as she lay on the ground more than a kilometer away, the ferocity and murderous intent that leaked from every pore of the purple flame wyvern's body was more than enough to give goosebumps to the bravest of the bravest. The three remained crouched at the top of the canyon as they looked down in silence, each with different thoughts. After a few minutes of deathly silence in which the only sound other than their breaths was the occasional growl of some closer beast, Gulim finally noticed that something in Xietan's expression was not right. Big brother? Princess Bianca also seemed to notice something. She turned to look at him just in time to see Xietain slowly rising to his feet. Get down quickly. If the purple flame wyvern sees you it will not only attack you but could also draw the demon lord. She was beginning to panic. The mount alone was already so terrifying and powerful. Bianca had no desire to face the owner of the mount. Fighting the demon lord? It was no different than courting death itself. Although Bianca and Gulim knew that Xietain was powerful, neither of them thought for even a second that he would be able to contend against the demon lord. However, the thinking of both of them was completely normal and natural. At the end of the day, Xietain had only recently made a name for himself while the demon lord had been at the top of Eventide world for centuries. It was impossible for any logical person to put a rising star on equal footing with a star already established high in the sky. You two should get away from here. Bianca and Gulim's eyes widened and their pupils trembled as they watched Xietain slowly walk up to the edge of the vast canyon. Be big brother, you. Gulim stammered and subconsciously tensed as he realized what the young man in front of him was thinking. You. Bianca looked at Xietan's back and whispered in shock, you're really going to go fight the demon lord? Are you crazy? You will die. Don't do it please. Xietain had become an important existence to both Bianca and Gulim. He had not only saved their lives but had treated them kindly despite being so powerful and talented, not to mention the fact that it was thanks to him that the two of them had managed to keep advancing so much in the past few days. It was naturally impossible for them to feel at ease now that they knew what he was planning. Who will die or who will live? That's something we won't know until later. Xietain opened his right hand as his arm hung casually at the side of his body. The mana inside his body moved at his will and the liquid storage pearl that was in his storage ring began to release purple blood belonging to a general demon. The blood came out of the storage ring and under his will it quickly molded into his grip, soon becoming an exquisite neon, purple majestic spear. This was the first time Bianca and Gulim saw Xietain openly manipulating the blood. The two were surprised as they could sense from the aura of the spear that it was definitely comparable to a weapon forged with at the very least 4,000 physical attack points. Xietain looked at the mausoleum-style building and at the purple flame wyvern with cold eyes as the records of his new skill, or rather, newly evolved skill, flashed in his pupils. Blazing Punishment of Divine Blood, 4th Order Active Skill, Level 1, obliterates, destroys, and annihilates everything in its path leaving nothing behind and erasing existence at the molecular level. Massive Destruction Skill that does not distinguish between ally, enemy, and even the caster himself. At the same time, however, this skill can be the most reliable ally depending on the lineage and wits of the user. First activation, Blazing Blood Punishment, consumes 300 mana points to activate and requires a blood-forged spear along with the power of a 3rd order flame or higher to initiate. The damage caused is the sum of the user's magic power, the power of the spear linked to the skill Blood Manipulation, the amount of mana invested in the creation of the spear, and the caster's magic stat, all multiplied by 4. Second activation, Divine Blood Punishment. However, Xietain moved his left foot slightly forward at the same time as he turned his body sideways and moved his right foot back. Guys. He extended his right arm outward, away from his body and lifted it together with the purple spear in the process. Swoosh! Deep blue flames suddenly engulfed the purple spear and began to burn with increasing power at the same time as Xietain consumed another 300 points of mana to strengthen the weapon's body. I definitely have no plans to die anytime soon. Xietain roared in a low voice at the same time as his arm muscles swelled and he began the throwing motion. Blazing Blood Punishment. His words echoed throughout the canyon at the same time as the previously closed eyes of the great purple flame wyvern suddenly opened wide. Chapter 870 by Xietain vs. Purple Flame Wyvern, Part 2 of 2. The Mount of the Demon Lord was a high-level third-order existence, which was why it was unquestionable that the Purple Flame Wyvern had a level of intelligence not at all inferior to that of a fully grown adult human. This was not to mention the fact that as it was a mutant beast, a wyvern at that, its sense of danger and ability to sense murderous intent hovering in the air were simply colossal. Despite the distance, the temperature of the endless blue lotus flame was so terrifying that a great part of the canyon experienced abrupt changes in its weather. Furthermore, Xietain had invested about half of his total mana to create the purple blood spear and strengthen it to the point where it would be the second most powerful spear he created with his blood manipulation skill, just below the giant spear he made back in Oblong World. Under such not at all camouflaged and impossible to hide movements, the purple flame wyvern's eyes snapped open. Its large dragon-like head moved to its left and upward, immediately noticing the human standing at the edge of the highest part of the canyon. The purple flame wyvern was a proud and arrogant existence that looked down on everyone except its rider. To it, humans whose bodies were weak even among those of the same level were basically trash, and it did not even put the so-called kings of kingdom in its eyes. However, the sense of crisis it felt from the human in the canyon was so great that its body moved before its brain. Xietain's black eyes met the large reptile eyes of the purple flame wyvern for a split second before he fiercely waved his right arm forward, and when the flaming spear reached the limit, he simply released his grip and let it go. Boom! The sonic blast shattered part of the cannon, and Xietain's body began to plummet as the ground beneath his feet fell away. As he disappeared from Princess Bianca and Gulim's line of sight, the two heard his deep voice, "You two, get out of here once and for all and don't be a drag." Gulim clenched his fists so tightly that his palms began to bleed. He didn't know how Xietain considered him, but to Gulim, Xietain was a friend and someone he respected wholeheartedly. Fuck. Not being able to help a friend and knowing that although Xietan's words were harsh they were also true made Gulim couldn't help but curse. "Let's move," he said as he turned around to walk away. Let's move. Bianca hopped up startled as the fierce roar of the usually calm Gulim shook her. Rumble. Ah! Bianca cried out in fright and surprise as the entire canyon began to shake. She turned to look down and saw that the flaming spear was now facing the ferocious breath of purple flames that was such a trademark of the Demon Lord's mighty mount. Boom! 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 In a single second, terrifying explosions shook the clouds in the sky, and slowly the entire cannon began to show signs of collapsing just from the momentary pressure of the clash between the two attacks. "Let's get out of here. This is not a battlefield we can step in," Gulim said in a barely audible voice amidst the ongoing disaster. Without waiting for a response, he began to walk away while pushing his natural agility to the maximum possible. Bianca looked back before biting her lower lip so hard that it began to bleed. She whispered something before turning around and beginning to run towards where Gulim had just left. Rumble! The sky shook harder and harder, and the earth split into countless pieces. Cracks of building sizes spread across the ground like flood dragons among the clouds, and a big part of the canyon lit up in purple and deep blue as Xietan's blazing blood punishment collided with the great wyvern's breath of corrupted flames. Although Xietain was surprised that the beast reacted so quickly and was able to partially contain his magic attack, he was not surprised enough to not know what to do next. His body turned into a crimson-red flash as countless lightning sparks of blood-colored flashes flickered noisily around his body. He leaped the cracks that appeared under his feet and dodged with great agility the large boulders that fell from all parts of the more and more destroyed Grand Canyon. His black eyes were as cold as ice, and in his pupils, there was only a silhouette as a sign that his target was more than clear. The purple flame wyvern roared furiously as it spent more and more mana trying to push back the magic attack falling from the sky. However, even though its flames were powerful enough to melt the earth without even touching it at all, the flame-wrapped spear still continued its descent with greater and greater might than before. "Little human ant, don't be so arrogant." The rabid roar of the wyvern, whose gender was revealed to be male, echoed not only inside the big canyon but also spread outwards, alerting hundreds of soul evolvers who were approaching toward the center of the dungeon. Unable to withdraw his attention from the spear in the sky and unable to slow the outflow of magic power and mana to avoid being hit full-on, the purple flame wyvern had no choice but to strike outward with his huge hammer tail. The wyvern's tail was large enough that Xietain could not dodge it if he wanted to complete his initial goal. Annihilation of the falling sky immediately appeared in his right hand, and the next moment the weapon's body was engulfed by crimson flames just before the two physical attacks collided. Boom! The ground split with greater intensity than before, and the rumbling in the sky became more violent. The purple flame wyvern's body trembled slightly and some scales on his tail showed signs of cracking. All this while keeping his breath of corrupted flames at maximum power and not daring to neglect the magic attack in the sky. As for Xietain, his body was sent flying backwards more than 80 meters. As expected of a dragon relative, Xietain realized that his natural strength was far from comparable to that of the purple flame wyvern. Ha! Xietain waved his hand backwards and a wall of blood formed on his back as his body flew down backwards. He turned in midair and forcefully kicked that wall of blood, disintegrating it and changing his course, now flying towards the huge wyvern as if he were a cannonball. The giant beast's golden eyes flashed with surprise and confusion as he suddenly saw two other exactly identical humans appearing, and worst of all, he couldn't immediately identify which one was the real one and which one was fake, as he needed to focus heavily on the spear that was now 1/4 of the way to crashing into his body. The purple flame wyvern swept his tail again in an attempt to hit all three figures at the same time. However, his attack only managed to hit the two that stepped forward and used their fists to strike. Boom! Boom! The two clones exploded in the face of the wyvern's significantly more powerful attack. However, the physical strength of each clone could also not be underestimated, considering that each of them had 30% of Xietan's overall power. The purple flame wyvern's hammer tail was only held back for a brief moment before continuing its advance towards the real Xietain. However, he took that moment to slide on the ground, and when he reached the beast's back he stomped the ground with force and soared over 200 meters in an instant. A trace of panic finally flashed in the wyvern's eyes. He could not turn his head as he needed to focus his breath skill on the spear, or else he would definitely be seriously wounded. Therefore, he could not know exactly where the human was. The purple flame wyvern swung his tail desperately like an uncontrolled whip in an attempt to catch his enemy by a lucky blow. Large craters were formed all over the ground, and had it not been for the fact that the large white building seemed to be being protected by something, then it would have collapsed long ago. Crimson flame! Endless blue lotus flame! Two overpowering roars shook the sky and spread far and wide. By this point, several soul evolvers climbed into large trees or scaled distant mountains and were watching from a distance what was happening. However, they all gasped in shock when they saw a human fighting against the terrifying mount of the demon lord. Xietan's body began to plummet from the sky, and as he slashed downward with his great golden sword wreathed in purple flames, he roared at the top of his lungs. Gravity manipulation. X60. Xietain had not only taken his skill Crimson Blood Judgment to the next stage, which led the name to change completely, but also evolved two other skills the same night Cat passed away. Between those skills was the skill Gravity Manipulation. However, the power of the skill had increased even more than he estimated it would.